It was meant to be a quiet afternoon inside the palace walls, but a sealed envelope changed everything. Princess Beatrice, once quietly loyal, now finds herself at the center of a royal betrayal. The news inside that letter didn't just target her, it erased her daughters from history. What Charles ordered in private has triggered a public family eruption with consequences that may echo through generations. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The envelope arrived without ceremony, no gilded announcement, no formal procession, just a thin, official document, slipped into the rhythm of a normal royal day. That was what made it cruel. Not a council chamber, not a family gathering, just paper, ink, and a decision that would redraw bloodlines. Inside were words so clinical, so stripped of emotion, they barely seemed real. A declaration that Princess Beatrice's daughters were no longer recognized within the line of succession. No explanation, no apology, no warning. Only the cold finality of a monarch's seal, as if centuries of heritage could be undone with a signature. Those close to Beatrice say she read it once without blinking, twice with trembling hands. And then the air left her lungs. The color drained from her face as the reality settled in, not a political maneuver, not a distant adjustment to royal order, but a personal strike against her children. Her daughters. The ones she had sworn to protect from the very machinery now turning against them. This wasn't a distant reshuffling of titles. This was erasure. A quiet deletion of their names from a future they were born into. What made it sting even deeper was the timing. The letter had been delivered just days before a major royal gathering, one meant to celebrate unity, lineage, and continuity, a moment when family would stand side by side, smiling for the world, pretending the foundation was unbreakable. Instead, Beatrice stood alone in a private room, staring at proof that continuity had limits and her children were beyond them. Insiders later whispered that the timing was not coincidence. It was a message, a warning, a demonstration of who decides who belongs. Beatrice had witnessed royal decrees before. She had watched distant cousins quietly repositioned, minor roles gently reassigned, futures altered with soft language and public grace. Those moments were handled with care, with an understanding that blood, even when reorganized, was still blood. This was different. This was sharp, surgical, devoid of cushioning. There were no preparatory conversations, no private assurances, no effort to preserve dignity. Only the order, and the expectation of silence. Within hours, unease rippled through the palace staff. Whispers travelled faster than official statements ever could. Some said the decision had been debated in private councils for months. Others insisted Charles had not acted alone, that unseen advisors and unspoken fears had guided the pen. Aides exchanged glances in hallways. Courtiers lowered their voices, because what had happened to Beatrice's daughters felt less like protocol and more like punishment. And yet, from the highest ranks, there was nothing. No immediate reassurance, no carefully worded support, no public unity. The silence from senior royals was not neutral, it was deafening. It confirmed what Beatrice had begun to feel the moment she read the letter, that this was not an oversight, this was deliberate. And whatever storm had been gathering behind palace walls had finally found its first casualty. But to understand why Beatrice was targeted so mercilessly, we must go back to the cold corridors of royal politics and uncover the hidden tensions that festered long before the letter arrived. Born under the shadow of scandal and tradition, Princess Beatrice's journey has always been uphill. She was royal enough to smile in portraits, but never quite enough to be protected. Her path, shaped by whispers and wounds, was quietly tragic, but no one paid attention. Until now. From the beginning, Beatrice's presence in the royal family came with baggage. As the first daughter of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, she was born into a marriage already teetering on the edge of collapse. The tabloids were merciless. Headlines devoured her mother, and the scandalous disintegration of her parents' marriage bled into the public's perception of her. Daughter of the Duke of York, was no innocent child in their eyes. She was collateral damage in a soap opera they never stopped watching. And while William and Harry were protected fiercely in the aftermath of their mother's death, Beatrice was quietly left to endure the cruelty of public judgment and private sidelining. The contrast wasn't just stark, it was systematic. While her cousins were championed, groomed, and elevated, Beatrice was brushed to the periphery. She wasn't the heir, she wasn't the spare, she wasn't even considered essential. Behind the palace doors, she carried the weight of a condition few dared to understand. Dyslexia became her silent battle, a struggle that affected everything from her schooling to her self-worth. Yet she pushed through not for praise, but for survival. Her academic journey was not one of prestige, but of perseverance. And even as the media mocked her fashion, questioned her intellect, and erased her achievements, she smiled. Because that's what the spare's daughter was taught to do: smile, stay silent, and never ask for more. But silence doesn't mean absence. Beatrice quietly built a life of service and purpose. She aligned herself with causes rooted in education and mental health, choosing not the glamorous path, but the meaningful one. She didn't demand the spotlight. She carved out a space behind it, and in doing so she became something rare in the royal family: authentic. Still, the monarchy barely blinked. Her loyalty was assumed, her sacrifices unnoticed, and her relevance always measured in proximity to more powerful names. Even Eugenie, her fiercely close sister, faced the same wall of indifference. Together, they were the ornamental daughters of a disgraced prince. A generation the palace didn't quite know what to do with, and so they were quietly cast aside. It was a pattern Beatrice recognized early. When William became the face of duty, when Harry was lauded as the bold one, when even Zara and Peter received more attention for their equestrian endeavors and royal lineage, the York girls remained in the background, tolerated but rarely celebrated. And as Beatrice became a mother herself, she began to see how the pattern might repeat, only this time it would cut deeper. Because it wouldn't be just her left out of history, it would be her daughters. This is the pain that brewed beneath her calm, the quiet resentment never voiced, the heartbreak never shared. Until now. Until a royal decree did what decades of exclusion never could: it pushed Beatrice to the brink. Because when the system decides you're secondary, your children become invisible. And for Beatrice, that was a line she could no longer bear to watch them cross. But if the system always viewed Beatrice as secondary, it's no surprise her daughters were never truly embraced. And that exclusion didn't happen by accident. While the cameras followed William and Catherine, a quieter council was assembling behind closed doors. Their task? Rebalance. CE the future. Their target? Bloodlines deemed non-essential. Beatrice's daughters weren't forgotten, they were deliberately removed, and it wasn't just about protocol. It was personal. In the days after Queen Elizabeth's death, the monarchy found itself at a crossroads. Public trust was fragile. Scandals lingered like shadows in every room of the palace. And with the crown in transition, the question loomed: what would the future of the royal family look like? It wasn't just a matter of duty, it became a matter of image, of legacy, and above all, control. Out of the public eye, a new advisory body was quietly born: the Strategic Succession Council. Their brief was simple: reshape the monarchy to ensure its survival in a modern world. But their actions would ignite a firestorm, because buried beneath strategy was something far more dangerous: bias. Insiders suggest that the council was neither small nor impartial. Senior figures like Princess Anne and Prince Edward were said to have been consulted not as decision-makers, but as validators. Their silence, many believe, became complicity. This wasn't a group formed for democratic reform, it was a surgical unit designed to cut. And it began with the Yorks. Beatrice and Eugenie's line had always been viewed as inconvenient. The daughters of a disgraced prince, their presence created tension between tradition and PR optics. So, when the time came to redraw the succession narrative, the council didn't hesitate. Beatrice's daughters weren't quietly left out. They were crossed out. And at the center of this operation stood Catherine. Once the smiling Duchess, now a force of precision and persuasion behind palace walls. Her growing influence over royal communications, charitable alliances, and future planning placed her closer to the heart of succession decisions than anyone outside the bloodline. Sources say her role wasn't aggressive, but it was undeniable. Her message was clear. The future had to be clean, lean, and symbolic of a stable crown, and in that vision some branches of the family tree had to fall away. The most damning whispers came not from critics, but from palace insiders. One aide, under condition of anonymity, described the council's goal as streamlining for the public eye. Another reportedly referred to the York descendants as clutter. These weren't accidents of language, they were calculated dismissals. They spoke to a deeper strategy: create a royal image that was easily digestible, photogenic, and above all, uncontroversial. And nothing about Beatrice's lineage, in their eyes, fit the new mold. But the most chilling insight came from a, quote, unverified, but widely circulated within the palace's inner circles, reportedly from Charles himself. The future doesn't need confusion. 6 words that cut deeper than any formal decree. 6 words that confirmed what Beatrice had suspected all along. Her daughters weren't victims of oversight, they were casualties of design. And yet, while the council believed they were tightening control, they missed one crucial element. Beatrice was no longer the silent daughter of the spare. She had watched. She had learned. And when the moment came, she didn't crumble. She moved. And the storm that followed wasn't one the crown had prepared for. But the crown underestimated Beatrice's spirit. What they saw as submission was silent preparation. And what came next left even the palace guards stunned. No royal leaves the palace without warning, especially not in full view of the staff. But Beatrice did. With her head held high, heart shattered, and no intention of returning. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just left, forcing the monarchy to reckon with the woman they cast aside. It began in whispers. A staff member noticing her wardrobe was lighter. A valet mentioning that her jewelry case had been cleared. Her aide, long loyal but unusually silent, was seen shredding documents in the private quarters. None of it added up until it did. Beatrice had made up her mind. She would not wait for apologies that would never come. She would not ask for answers no one dared to give. She had been erased from the future, and now she would erase herself from the palace that no longer welcomed her daughters. But she wouldn't go quietly. She had one final move, one that would be remembered far longer than the letter that triggered it all. On the morning she left, Beatrice requested a private audience with a senior courtier, one who had served both her grandmother and now her uncle. The exchange was brief, but brutal. Witnesses say her words were sharp enough to silence even the most hardened member of the royal inner circle. She didn't ask for mercy, she delivered judgment. I was born into this family. My daughters were born into this legacy. You don't get to decide when we stop mattering. The courtier didn't respond. He didn't have to. The decision had already been made. But Beatrice's tone made something chillingly clear. The palace may have started this war, but she would finish it. Eugenie arrived too late. Alerted by a frantic phone call from a mutual friend, she rushed to the palace gates just in time to see her sister stepping into the black car waiting by the side entrance. Eyewitnesses say Eugenie tried to stop her, pleading with her through the open window. But Beatrice didn't budge. Her eyes were red, but not from tears, from fire, from finality. She told her sister, "Don't follow me this time. I need them to see what they've done." And with that, she was gone. Inside, the silence was broken only by the soft sobs of staff members who had watched her grow up. One maid reportedly collapsed in the hallway, whispering through tears, she deserved better. Another, trembling, handed her resignation within the hour. The monarchy had made its choice, but so had Beatrice. And this time the public would not be shielded from the consequences. The media captured her departure, her face solemn, her back unbroken. But no one knew the full story. Not until the leaks began. Not until insiders hinted that this wasn't just a symbolic exit. It was a protest, a renunciation. The loudest whisper came from a guard stationed at the side gate, who claimed Beatrice turned to him and said, "Tell them I no longer recognize this crown." If true, those words could echo for generations. But Beatrice didn't walk out in silence. She left behind a letter of her own. and what it said would shatter illusions about royal loyalty forever. Buried under centuries of tradition, one letter broke through like a scream. Beatrice didn't just walk out. She documented her betrayal, named names, and laid bare the truth behind palace hypocrisy. It wasn't just a note, it was a reckoning. The letter, handwritten on her personal stationery, was meant for King Charles. But its contents never remained confined to the royal desk. A loyal staffer, disillusioned by what they had witnessed, leaked its contents within hours of Beatrice's departure. And what emerged was not a plea for reconciliation, but a declaration of war. Beatrice's words burned with pain, purpose, and clarity. She wrote not with trembling hands, but with conviction sharpened by years of quiet sidelining. In her own voice, unfiltered and unapologetic, she asked the question that no one in power dared to answer. Why are my daughters not royal enough to dream? The letter exposed more than the decision to cut her daughters from the line of succession. It dismantled the narrative of fairness and unity the monarchy had so carefully constructed. Beatrice accused Charles of bowing not to tradition, but to convenience. She spoke of betrayal layered over decades, how the family had turned its back time and again on those it deemed less useful to the crown's image. The tone was not hysterical, it was controlled. But every sentence struck like a blade, each one a reflection of the years she had spent trying to believe she belonged. Without naming her directly, Beatrice made thinly veiled references to Camilla's growing influence over Charles's decisions. When the crown's direction is shaped by whispers instead of wisdom, she wrote, those once raised to uphold it are now silenced for its comfort. It was an indictment of not only a monarch, but of a machine, a system that claimed to protect family but operated on exclusion. Her words cut through the royal illusion of cohesion and revealed a fracture so deep, even silence couldn't hide it anymore. But Beatrice didn't stop at the present. A letter reached back through time, referencing broken promises made when she was a child, memories of being left behind, of watching others favored while she stood quietly at the margins. She invoked her grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth, not as a shield, but as a moral compass. Granny would have never let this happen, she wrote. It wasn't just sentiment, it was strategy. By invoking the Queen's legacy, she challenged the legitimacy of the current regime's choice, ace, and placed herself within a lineage of honor that the current monarchy had, in her view, forsaken. The final line of her letter left no room for ambiguity. It was less a closing and more a warning. History won't forget silence. Those words reverberated far beyond palace walls. They struck at the very heart of the crown's image, confronting its silent complicity in injustice. This wasn't a plea for attention. It was a demand for accountability and a refusal to disappear quietly. As the letter made its rounds, within the palace, one person in particular was shaken to their core, not Charles, not William, but Prince Andrew. He was already disgraced, already exiled, but when Beatrice walked out, Andrew rose. Not as a prince reclaiming power, but as a father clinging to relevance. What he did next, behind closed palace doors, sparked one final confrontation, and it nearly brought down the crown. Within hours of Beatrice's departure, Prince Andrew requested an urgent audience with the king. Palace aides were caught off guard. The man who had been kept at arm's length, tucked away in silence after years of scandal, now stood at the gates of power demanding to be heard. Charles didn't deny him. Perhaps curiosity compelled him, perhaps arrogance. But when the door to the king's private study finally closed, it didn't stay quiet for long. What followed was not a conversation, it was a reckoning. Eyewitnesses later confessed they heard the echo of raised voices shouting that cracked through the still air of Buckingham's most restricted wing. The tension, they said, was electric. Andrew, for the first time in years, spoke not as a royal disgraced, but as a father enraged. He challenged Charles on every point, on the decision to cut his granddaughters from the succession, on the cowardice of hiding behind silence, on the betrayal not only of Beatrice, but of blood. He didn't beg, he threatened. "If they're out, so am I," he reportedly spat. "And you'll regret the silence." That line, confirmed by multiple inside sources, sent a chill through the palace. Not because it was a tactical blow, but because it came from a man who had nothing left to lose. For a brief, breathless moment, even Andrew's harshest critics were silenced. His defiance wasn't born of entitlement, this time it was born of fury, of the primal instinct to protect what little remained of his legacy. It was a glimpse of a version of Andrew long buried under scandal and shame, not the rogue prince, but the wounded father. And for that moment alone he had power. But Charles didn't waver. His reply, though quiet, carried a weight that ended the confrontation in one stroke. "This family is moving forward with or without your approval." Those words landed like a hammer. No negotiation, no compromise. It was the monarchy's final word on Beatrice, her children, and Andrew's position in the royal machine. He had come to fight for his daughter's dignity, and he left with a bitter truth lodged deep in his chest. The monarchy had not only survived without him, it had adapted. As Andrew walked out of that room, the halls that once bowed to his title now stared through him. The family he had once represented no longer looked his way. D fought his last battle and lost. But while the fathers clashed, another silent force was preparing to step forward, someone the royals never expected to defend Beatrice. She's been called the crown's rising star, the strategist of Windsor. But even Catherine couldn't ignore what happened to Beatrice. What she did next didn't make headlines, but it may have changed the entire course of what happens next inside the royal walls. In the days following Beatrice's departure and the leak of her now infamous letter, a strange stillness settled over the palace. Statements were withheld. Public appearances were managed with military precision. But behind the curtain, not everyone agreed with the choices made at the top. And among the whispers in the halls of Kensington, one voice carried more weight than most Catherine's. She hadn't supported the decision to remove Beatrice's daughters from the line of succession. In fact, according to a trusted aide, her private words were far from neutral. "This was cruel," she reportedly told her secretary. "Unnecessary, and we'll pay for it later." Yet true to her nature, Catherine didn't rush to the stage. She moved in shadows where her influence thrived best. It began with a quiet meeting. Late one evening, she summoned Princess Anne and a discreet royal advisor to a private drawing room. What was discussed has never been formally disclosed, but insiders say it's centered around the future of the monarchy and its increasingly public cracks. Catherine, nay, deeply aware of the public's shifting values, was said to push for a reframing of what modern monarchy should look like, more inclusive, less punitive, and above all humane. She didn't plead for Beatrice's daughters by name. She didn't need to. Her message was coded but clear. The family could not continue cutting off its own branches and expect to keep standing. But her diplomacy had limits. When aides approached her to sign off on a public statement justifying the exclusion of Beatrice's daughters, Catherine refused. Flatly, she would not lend her voice to a defense she didn't believe in. It was a silent rebellion, but a rebellion nonetheless. And it sent tremors through the palace. Because when the future queen consort stops playing along, the rules begin to bend. Behind the scenes, Catherine was wrestling with a deeper conflict. Loyalty to the crown had defined her entire existence. Every move, every smile, every calculated silence crafted in service of the institution. But now, that institution was making decisions she could no longer morally defend. In a moment of rare vulnerability, she allegedly wrote a letter to Beatrice. It was never sent, never signed. But those who saw it say it read like an apology wrapped in pain. "I don't agree with what they've done," it said. "You and your girls deserved better. I hope one day we can speak without walls between us." That unsent letter became a symbol of the tightrope. Catherine now walks between duty and conscience, legek, why, and humanity. She remains the royal family's most composed figure. But inside, the fracture runs deep. She knows the monarchy cannot survive on image alone, and if it continues to turn on its own, she may be forced to choose not between sides, but between silence and truth. But as Catherine hesitated behind the scenes, it was Eugenie who decided enough was enough, and she was ready to go public. For generations, royals have stayed silent, but Eugenie shattered that rule in one breathtaking moment. One interview, one carefully timed quote, and suddenly, The world saw the crown's fracture in real time. The fallout was immediate. The palace was livid. But Eugenie? Unapologetic. It happened during what was supposed to be a simple charity appearance. A routine broadcast for a children's health initiative, one of many events Eugenie had attended without incident. But this time, the air around her felt different. Perhaps it was Beatrice's absence. Perhaps it was the weight of everything left unsaid. As the interview neared its end, the host casually referenced family, asking how Eugenie was coping with the shifting roles within the royal structure. Her eyes narrowed, her voice didn't waver, and then came the quote that would ignite a firestorm across the globe. "Some families protect their daughters," she said, pausing just long enough to draw breath. "Others erase them." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric. The clip hit social media within minutes, and within an hour, it was everywhere. Headlines exploded, hashtags trended, hashtag erased by the crown, climbed faster than anyone at the palace could contain. For the first time in years, the British royal family's internal cruelty wasn't being hinted at, it was being declared openly by one of their own. There was no ambiguity in her words, no way to spin or water it down. Eugenie had broken the sacred pact of royal discretion, and she had done it with surgical precision. In Buckingham Palace, the response was immediate and panicked. A statement was rushed out before the sun set, carefully worded, desperately neutral. It did not name Eugenie, nor did it acknowledge the content of what she said. It simply emphasized the family's commitment to unity and respect in all matters. But the damage was already done. The public had heard the truth, and more importantly, they had heard it from someone inside. Not a critic, not a commentator. A daughter, a sister. The backlash against Charles was swift. Social media erupted with calls for transparency. Think pieces flooded news outlets. Public opinion, which had already begun to fracture following Beatrice's departure, now turned sharply against the crown's inner circle. Many called it the final confirmation that the monarchy had lost touch with the very values it claimed to uphold: compassion, family, duty. Instead, it looked like an institution that punished dissent and erased its own. But while the palace scrambled for damage control, Eugenie's star began to rise. She was no longer the quiet royal who painted and supported causes from the shadows. She became a symbol of sisterhood, of bravery, of rebellion wrapped in royalty. She didn't issue a follow-up statement. She didn't offer clarification. She didn't need to. Her words had landed, and she knew exactly what she'd done. She had cracked the facade, and in doing so proved that silence was no longer the crown's greatest weapon. But as the monarchy scrambled for damage control, one unexpected twist emerged: a historical document, once hidden, now threatens to upend everything again. Buried in the vaults of the royal archives lies a clause long dismissed, quietly ignored. But now, it's back, and it could legally restore Beatrice's daughters to the line of succession. One twist of fate, one stroke of ink, and the monarchy may be forced to choose between tradition and truth. The discovery came not from a royal but from a quiet legal historian, combing through documents from Queen Victoria's reign. Hidden among faded parchment was a forgotten amendment, an obscure clause that, under specific conditions, grants protection to the descendants of female royals, especially those born within lines not directly involved in constitutional affairs. The clause had been left untouched for over a century, believed irrelevant in the modern succession framework. Until now, until Beatrice's daughters were erased. Suddenly, this dusty relic of royal law was no longer obsolete, it was dangerous. Legal scholars pounced. Debate erupted in academic circles and legal forums. The wording, while archaic, was shockingly clear in its intention. And it didn't just suggest a technicality, it suggested that Beatrice's daughters might, by birthright, still belong in the line of succession. The implications were seismic. Palace lawyers scrambled, not to validate it, but to bury it. Meetings were called behind locked doors, advisors were warned to stay quiet, and within days, unnamed sources began whispering that the palace was doing everything possible to prevent the clause from reaching parliamentary attention. But it was too late. The public had already heard. News outlets picked up the story, connecting it to Beatrice's exile and the brutal removal of her dow. Utters. Momentum swelled. Protests outside royal residences began calling for justice. Hashtags demanded transparency. Legal petitions circulated, urging Parliament to examine the legitimacy of the clause. And then came the twist no one saw coming: Beatrice's sudden reappearance in London. No press, no escort, just quiet movements that stirred massive speculation. Was she back to challenge the system in court? Was this the beginning of a legal battle that could turn the royal order upside down? The palace remained frozen. No confirmation, no denial. But every passing hour deepened the sense that something irreversible had been set in motion. The public wasn't just watching, they were choosing sides. And the York grandchildren, once dismissed as irrelevant, were now symbols of a larger war over fairness, legacy, and identity. The monarchy had made its decision in secret, but now the law might speak louder than any crown. And so, the final question hangs heavy in the air. If the law is on Beatrice's side, will Charles defy it again? As history turns its page once more, one thing is certain: the monarchy may never be the same again, and the daughters they tried to erase are now at the heart of a revolution. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.